Stunned music lovers mourn the shocking death of game changer and music legend Prince. Promoting trade between East Africa and the U.S. And the hottest wedding gown trends hit the runway at Bridal Fashion Week. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The doves are really crying now is what media mogul Oprah Winfrey said about the death of international music superstar Prince, referencing his 1984 mega hit When Doves Cry. The 57-year-old icon was found dead Thursday morning at his home outside the U.S. city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The cause of death has not been determined, and authorities said the results of an autopsy scheduled for Friday is expected to take several days. The death of the man born Prince Rogers Nelson has shocked and saddened his fans and music lovers worldwide. VOA's Laritza Hoke reports that Prince is being praised for his innovative music style that combined jazz, R&B, funk, pop, and disco. But many people also remember him as a humanitarian.
Purple Rain, the title song of Prince's 1984 album and movie, remains his signature work. The album has sold 20 million copies worldwide and is regularly ranked as one of the best of all time. It includes tracks recorded at a benefit concert. Beneath the flamboyant appearance, there was a caring heart.
Last time I was here, a lot of people didn't get to see me, so we're trying to make it affordable for everybody. That's why we're doing the extended stay.
U.S. civil rights activist Al Sharpton was among the first to point out that Prince was a humanitarian as well as a musician. He said Prince made charitable contributions for the education of disadvantaged children and other needy groups without publicizing it.
I think that millions of people of all races and backgrounds are saddened today with the sudden loss of a true prince who really was a king.
At the news of his death Thursday, fans gathered outside Prince's home and studio near Minneapolis. Vigils and memorial services are being held around the country. His music has left an impression on Hollywood stars.
It means my whole life. It's the backdrop to my life, and I'm so lucky to have lived when I did because it's a nice one, you know. I love him. Love, love.
And ordinary people.
Thank you for your dedication, for you knowing your purpose of life, and you already exceeded that purpose.
Prince won 7 Grammy Awards for his music and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004. One of his most notable performances was a halftime show during the 2007 Super Bowl. Laritza Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Barack Obama said about Prince, the world has lost a creative icon. Street celebrations honoring the life of American pop icon Prince lasted into the early hours of Friday, long after the announcement of his death. In the music superstar's hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, thousands celebrated with a massive block party outside the club where Prince performed several times. In New York, filmmaker Spike Lee hosted a party for around 1,000 people outside his Brooklyn headquarters. In Los Angeles, a drama played his tribute to Prince hours after the world learned of his death at age 57 at his residence outside Minneapolis.
He has a way with that passion, with that music, of making you feel it. And he don't stop until you feel it. Don't have to be rich.
And in a fitting gesture through a night of celebrations across the U.S., the Los Angeles City Hall was lit up in purple in memory of Prince. It was amazing. Now, Chadian President Idriss Deby has been re-elected in a landslide first-round victory, winning his fifth term with 61.5% of the vote in April 10th poll. Now, Chad's Election Commission made the announcement on Thursday. President Deby is an important ally of the West in the fight against Islamic militants. The 63-year-old Deby argued during the campaign that only his government was capable of ensuring security amid a rising wave of extremist violence. Well, now, President Deby, who gained power in 1990 at the end of an armed rebellion, abolished restrictions in 2004 on how many times the president can run for office. VOA reporter Bagashi Kaura has just returned from Chad, where he covered the elections, and now joins me in studio. Welcome to Africa 54, and it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Sometime. Now, first, there was something interesting about this result. The announcement was done at some odd hours, right?
Yeah, at night time, there were police forces everywhere, from what I've been hearing. And people have been afraid for several days now because they didn't know exactly what to expect because, you know, they voted since April 10, and it's only yesterday they got the results.
That's a long time. You were there.
Yes.
How would you describe the conduct of the election?
I think the campaign was kind of fair. The campaign was fair, but the election, we could start seeing that, you know, many things went wrong. There are places where people didn't get to vote. It happened in the west of the country. It happened in some neighborhood like Putal Bagar in N'Djamena, where people think these are stronghold of opposition. They didn't get the ballot. You know, early in the morning, Putal Bagar, I think it was 9, 10. They ran out of ballot, and instead of sending them ballots, they sent them police forces to keep them quiet all day. And after the vote, what happened was people had the sense, this time around, maybe we will have a runoff at least. If Deby wins, it will still be okay. At least we have a sense of the beginning of some change. Maybe next time around, if we go to runoff this time, next time around, you know, we can have the full change. And this was a surprise yesterday because the opposition, they had 13 candidates, you know, one drop, so they had 12, you know, facing Idriss Deby. And they were hoping if they all do a good campaign, they could force him to a runoff, you know. But after the vote, they felt good because people came out in great number. I think the number we had is like 76% of participation. But in the end, what we got is that they were not involved in the rest of the process.
So it's like the government controlled the voting process, they controlled the counting process, and eventually when the counting was being done, technically the opposition was completely cut out of this, only to be surprised by a result at some crazy hour of the night, right?
Yeah, exactly. They were cut off, and you have some ballots that have disappeared after the vote in provinces. The second town of Chad, Mundu, where the mayor of that town is one of the main contenders. He came in third, according to the Electoral Commission. His town has many issues during election day. And you have police forces sometimes taking ballot and, you know, making sure they are counted wherever they want the ballot to go.
So, another term. For how many years? 5, right?
5 years. And what is surprising, it's kind of, you know, you have around Chad, countries like Niger, Benin in West Africa, having election and giving a result within 2-3 days.
Yeah, but this one, too long.
This one, they have to take so long.
Well, very interesting there. Thanks, nevertheless, for being there, covering it, and coming to tell us more about it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Bagasi. Thanks to reporter Bagasi Kora, who just returned from Chad. Now, world leaders took historic action at the United Nations on Friday in an effort to slow the effects of climate change and fix some of the damage when they signed the climate deal reached in Paris last December. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir reports.
Super cyclone Winston slammed into the Pacific island nation of Fiji in February, killing 44 people and causing $1 billion in damage.
The frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, such as Winston's, is increasing. And we all have to be fearful about what this means, not only for ourselves, but for future generations.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has long urged leaders to take action on climate change.
That is the only way which we can save this one only planet Earth.
Last December in Paris, leaders hammered out the details of an agreement to limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius. It also lays out a roadmap for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating the effects of a warming planet. That includes moving towards renewable energies such as wind and solar power. In New York on Friday, leaders from more than 130 countries will take the first step towards implementing their commitments by signing the agreement. Then governments must ratify it.
For the Paris Agreement to enter into force, it must cross two critical thresholds. First, at least 55 parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change must ratify the agreement, and those 55 parties or more must represent at least 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Key to implementation are China and the United States, which together account for about 40% of the world's emissions. Both have urged early entry into force of the deal. The target date is 2020, but if countries ratify quickly, it could happen this year or early 2017. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
Residents of Somalia remain on edge as the terrorist group Al-Shabaab continues its campaign of terror. The United Nations Security Council expressed grave concern Thursday at the fragility of the security situation in the East African nation. They reiterated their strong condemnation of attacks and recruitment of children by the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, but commended the African Union mission in Somalia and the Somali National Army for their efforts in reducing the threat posed by Al-Shabaab. The Security Council underscored the importance of the continuation of offensive operations against the group by the Somali National Army and AMISOM. In a recent interview with VOA, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was asked why Al-Shabaab has in the recent past succeeded in taking more territory from the government.
What's going on in Somalia is a bigger war. It's a worldwide, global war is going on in Somalia. And when you look at the bigger picture of the war, Somalia is a model, a succeeding model. But in such type of war, one can lose a battlefield. What you're talking about are battlefields, but the overall war in Somalia, AMISOM and Somali National Army are succeeding, and Somalia become a model for those countries that are fighting this type of war.
We want to know what you think about issues that affect your daily life. So each week we ask you a question and we profile some of your responses. This week we asked, what should be done to reduce corruption in Africa? And we have received a lot of answers. Well, Diallo Abdullahi from Lagos, Nigeria wrote, we need a strong judiciary system and we need to ensure there is a political willingness to enforce such a system. Mila Tay from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia believes that 18 and 22-year-olds should join military service for a few months to learn what ethics mean and how to fight corruption. Prince John from Kampala in Uganda says we have to put corrupt leaders in jail to set an example for others. Well, thank you very much for your responses, and please keep them coming. Next week, we will continue profiling your answers about what can be done to reduce corruption in Africa. Go to Facebook. The address is Africa54, and tell me what you think, or send me a tweet at VOA Vince Makori. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, promoting trade between the U.S. and East Africa. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
David Lukui used to be a tobacco farmer. Today he grows sunflowers in Kenya. He says, I planted 1 acre this season and I'm expected to harvest 15 bags. Sunflowers are easier to grow because they require less rain and nutrients. They grow fast and can be harvested about 4 times a year, so the seeds and the oil compressed from the seeds make sunflowers more profitable than farming maize and tobacco. Another farmer, Stephen Youngesa, works with a farmers group who buy seeds in bulk, and they hope to sell them to refineries sometime in the future. He says in one day we can process 1 sack of seed which we package in 10 liters. This is a half-liter bottle of oil which I sell for about 80 cents. Sunflower oil is rich in vitamin E and low in saturated fat, and while used in foods, it's also used to make soap and cosmetics, and also animal feed. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Welcome back. In business news, the East Africa Chamber of Commerce is a non-profit platform that promotes trade and investments between the United States and East Africa. The EACC will hold its inaugural Trade and Investment Summit USA meetings in September and October 2016. I recently sat down with Ronnie Mayanja. He's a board member of the EACC, and asked him what opportunities exist in East Africa for American investors.
We're looking at sectors like agriculture, we're looking at sectors like infrastructure, we're looking at sectors like tourism to actually see how, these governments can actually be able to send representatives and actually make a difference in terms of tap into the American companies that could do business on the other side.
Somebody looking at the East African market, of course, gets impressed by the sheer numbers of the people who reside there, over 160 million, perhaps close to 170 million. Question is, how do you explain to somebody that there is a viable market in a region where a number of countries seem to be fairly unstable for a potential investor? They ask those questions, how do you convince the person that it's a good place to go in and invest?
Of course, one of the things that I do acknowledge, especially when you look at what is going on in Burundi, for instance, the instability is definitely documented. The one thing, though, that the citizens of the region will agree on is a bigger market. We're working towards that whole perfection. Think about a country like the United States has been around for 200 years. We've only been around, say, 52, 53 years for the region. So I think it's still a work in progress, but definitely you make a good point that the leaders and the leadership has to also do a little bit more to make sure that there's stability whereby all the other countries.
Besides stability, one of the other things that really, really undermines business, trade across the region is lack of infrastructure. Many parts of those countries are not easily accessible, and so potential investor, somebody you're talking to in the United States, is saying, let's go and invest in East Africa. They raise that. How are you addressing that with the countries themselves?
For us, we're creating sort of a hub whereby if, for instance, instead of Uganda government of Tanzania or Rwanda trying to organize a day where they invite investors to Washington, to their embassy, we are creating a hub through this conference, our Trade and Investment Conference, to allow for them to actually come and be either showcase what potential opportunities do exist in their countries, respective countries, that is Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, depending on whichever country you look at, and then people from here who might have interest in those sectors to actually tap into that. So ours is creating an opportunity where we can actually be able to grow those sectors and to allow for these people to harness those sectors. We are just creating the environment, so to say, one as business owners and business leaders, and also as native East Africans who are now American citizens, just to try and see how we could have a synergy of sorts.
So now, break down a little bit the opportunities that exist across the region, and perhaps you can give us a sense of which particular country perhaps is better suited for this kind of investment.
Of course, their biggest foreign exchange earner is tourism, but they are looking to do investments in education, for instance. And then, of course, agriculture is the second priority they have. Look at countries like Uganda. Infrastructure has been key. You get it, building infrastructure. And then, of course, IT for Uganda and Rwanda is also key. Those are areas where there's a little bit of virgin sort of investment opportunities. And then, of course, mobile money platforms now. People remit and use money using, basically send and receive money using mobile money platforms. So we want to see how we can actually be able to engage people in the IT sector, as well as, those types of technologies, like Safaricom is doing in Kenya to actually grow those sectors. So there are many, but I would tell you that tourism is definitely a big foreign exchange earner. You're looking at agriculture, you're looking at infrastructure development, roads especially, we need that, dams and bridges.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Designers showcase next year's hottest bridal trends. We'll be right back.
Kenya is 100% committed to ensure total compliance with our international regulations on sports and athletics.
Fortunately, on that, what I can tell you as a personal representative of President Obama is that we will never give up.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Now, as details of legendary singer Prince's death emerge, collaborators, friends, and well-known fans have begun to express their sadness over the tragic news. Singer Justin Timberlake tweeted, "Numb, stunned. This can't be real." Actor Samuel L. Jackson wrote, "I'm crushed." UK News reporting Prince is dead. For real? Massive loss for us all. What a genius, speechless. Another legend, record producer Quincy Jones, added, "R.I.P. to Prince, a true artist in every sense of the word." Well, next up, a trendy Tokyo establishment is a real hoot. It seems no creature, great or small, is safe from ending up in a cafe to delight paying customers. Owls fill this space in Tokyo, some watching curiously, others being petted while perched on a visitor's arm. Designed to look a bit like a theme park, Owl Forest has 33 owls at any one time, and the variety of birds that can be found here takes most customers by surprise. It seems these traditionally nocturnal birds are able to adjust their body clocks to stay awake during the day to entertain the human clientele. And for now, at least, there is no shortage of customers who pay $9 an hour for the privilege. Well, and finally, from Fairtale princess gowns to showgirl sequins, New York's Bridal Fashion Week has something for brides of every size, shape, and style. While white gowns reign supreme, the collections also contain splashes of color and plenty of sparkle. Organza gowns featured hand-painted floral designs in asymmetrical layered tulle. Deep necklines were prominent, with simple slip dresses offered along with bohemian gowns of lace and sheer skirts. There was a ton of drama in extra long trains and encrusted sheer overlays. Brides looking for drama can opt for extra long trains, corsets, and encrusted sheer overlays. And that is what is trending today. Well, the U.S. currency is getting a new face. The U.S. Treasury Department has announced that their first African-American woman, an anti-slavery crusader, will be featured on the face of the $20 bill. VOA's Caroline Turner has more.
The U.S. Treasury Department announced Wednesday that an African-American woman, abolitionist and anti-slavery crusader Harriet Tubman will replace former slave owner President Andrew Jackson on the front of the $20 bill. She will be the first woman and first minority featured on U.S. paper currency in modern times. The design overhaul leaves Alexander Hamilton on the $10 note with women suffragists on the back side. The move is the latest chapter in a 10-month controversy that erupted after Treasury Secretary Jacob J. Lew tried to address gender imbalance on U.S. currency notes. He opened up the selection process to the public, and controversy ensued.
As we went through the candidates, the possible names, I have to tell you the story of Harriet Tubman is really a compelling one, and the amount of interest, particularly young people writing to me, where they're learning about Harriet Tubman in school the way my generation learned about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. That's great. And I think our money should reflect the contribution of somebody like Harriet Tubman, who by sheer force of will, her own determination, she was born a slave, she was illiterate for her whole life, but not only did she lead many people out of slavery through the Underground Railroad, she worked for our army, helping them as a spy to help them figure out where to go during the Civil War. And afterwards, she was one of the early leaders in the movement to give women the right to vote, the suffrage movement. It's just an incredible story about how a person can change life in this great country.
Tubman is the first woman featured on the face of U.S. paper currency in more than a century. Alexander Hamilton remains on the $10 bill. He is a U.S. founding father and the first Treasury Secretary. Changes will be made to the $5 bill to depict civil rights and ERA leaders. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. We leave you now with more sights and sounds of Prince fans celebrating his storied music career.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Pins and needles are small, sharp, thin metal objects often used when sewing. But what do you think it means when people say this?
On pins and needles.
Oh, hi. Hey, how did your audition go last weekend?
I think it went okay, but I won't hear back from the casting director until the middle of next week.
Oh, the waiting game is the worst.
Got that right. I'm going to be on pins and needles until I get that phone call.
If someone is on pins and needles, they are very nervous or anxious. It is usually used to describe someone who is waiting to hear news about something really important to them. It is hard to relax if you are on pins and needles. And that's English in a Minute.